Hello everyone and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady and today I would like to talk about the new rules that were released from the new Space Wolves Codex that is being made available for pre-order this Saturday. Games Workshop decided to give us a tiny bit of information to hype up the release, and I can say that at least for myself, that it has worked. These rules look great so far, and these are only a snippet of what is meant to come. So let's get into discussing the new rules and units that Games Workshop has announced. Before we get into that though, this video was sponsored by themagnetbaron.com. They offer magnets of all shapes and sizes, magnetized movement trays, magnetized flight stands, and even offer fully built magnetized models, all for a great price. So if you're looking at getting some magnets for your hobby, then check out themagnetbaron.com. The link is in the description. With that said, let's dive right into the new Space Wolf information. I am at the Warhammer community page that is going over all of the different stuff. Well, there's two pages, but I'm going to look at the first one that was released yesterday, and I'm going to go over the stuff that they were talking about. So we have faction abilities. The first thing they released is what I'm assuming is going to be their chapter tactic, and this is Hunters Unleashed. In any turn in which a unit with this ability made a charge move, was charged, or made a heroic intervention, you can add 1 to the hit rolls in the fight phase. In addition, characters with this ability can perform a heroic intervention if, after the enemy has completed all of their charge moves, there are any enemy units within 6 inches of them. They can move up to 6 inches when performing a heroic intervention so long as they end their move closer to the nearest enemy model. So my first instinct is that this is the opposite of the Red Thirst. The Red Thirst is the Blood Angels chapter tactic, which gives them a +1 to wound whenever they charge, get charged, or heroically intervene. So this is +1 to hit. So my first reaction is that this isn't as good as the Red Thirst, but now after thinking about it, I think it's I don't know, it's hard to say if it's as good or just as good, but it's still really good. I don't want to compare it to the Red Thirst. Let's compare it to itself and see what we can do with it. So with adding 1 to hit rolls, people might be thinking, well, all of my characters hit on 2s already, so what's the point of this? Well, if you give those characters Power Fists or Thunder Hammers, they'd have a -1 to hit, meaning they'd hit on 3s. But now with this, they basically cancel out that -1, and now all of your characters can hit with Thunder Hammers and Power Fists on 2 pluses, which means I think you should almost always take Thunder Hammers or Power Fists on your characters to get the most use out of this. Then on top of that, you're going to be able to heroically intervene up to 6 inches, which is massive. So if you're playing a Deathball style army, which I think is how this army is going to be played, then you're going to have all of your units in one big ball, and if they charge one character, well then they're going to get heroically intervened on by a couple of other characters. So overall, I think this is great. It'll also help with other units too that we're going to get into pretty soon, like some Dreadnoughts and stuff. That they have new Dreadnoughts now that will be hitting on 2s and stuff. We'll get into that in a minute, but overall, I think this Hunters Unleashed is amazing. I actually think it's really good, and yeah, I actually like it. I was hoping they got the Red Thirst, but this is, in my opinion, just as good. It's just a little different. Sure, they'll be wounding on 3s with their Thunder Hammers and stuff, which is still okay, but there's ways to increase that as well with other stuff we're going to be talking about pretty soon. So let's not waste any more time talking about this. I've come to the conclusion this is amazing. I think some lists are going to be built around this, especially my list that I'm working on. I'm going to build it around this. So yeah, let's move on. Let's talk about some other stuff. So improved data sheets. Apparently Santa Claus and Logan Grimnar, or no, Santa Claus and what's this guy? Murderfang. They got new data sheets. They're going to have more attacks. They're going to just be different. This guy, I believe, has a 2-up save now. So yeah, these are going to be much better than they were. I don't know if they're still going to, I don't know if they're going to be playable or not, to be honest. I'm thinking I'll probably end up just going with the generic characters because they're cheaper and they end up doing like the same job anyways for the most part. So yeah, I don't know about these guys. We'll see. We have to wait for the Codex to know for sure because they haven't given away too much information. They just said this guy gets a +1 save and that Murderfang gets more attacks. That's all they've really said, so we'll have to wait to see about that. New data sheets, we got some new Terminators. That's going to be cool. These guys look awesome. But with the way Terminators are in this edition, they're probably going to be overpriced and never used in competitive play, so there's that. We have a new unit called the Wolf and Dreadnought, which I think this unit is going to be great. Because it's a Dreadnought that comes with a Fenrisian Great Axe and a Great Wolf Claw and Stormbolter. But you can trade the Great Wolf Claw for a Blizzard Shield, which I'm assuming is going to be the same as a Storm Shield, which means you'll have Dreadnoughts that have a 3-up invul, which is nuts. I absolutely love that. Then on top of that, The Fenrisian Great Axe now has 2 different modes that you can use. You have Cleave, which is the anti-tank. You're -1 when you use this, but again, you're +1 because of your trait, so you're still hitting on 3s with this Cleave ability, or with the Cleave part of the Great Axe. And then with the Scythe ability, you'll be hitting on 2s, and you make 2 hit rolls for each of them, so you'll have 8 attacks hitting on 2s, and then with Strength User, which is 6, against most infantry in the game, you'll be wounding on 3s. And with other stuff that you have coming up later that we'll be talking about, you can get a +1 to your wound rolls, which mean you'd be wounding on 2s. So yeah, I think the Wolf and Dreadnought is going to be a unit that we're probably going to see in some Space Wolves lists. I'm going to have to experiment with them. Again, it really depends on the price too. Like if these things are 250 points, then you probably won't see many of them at all. But it depends on how much they cost and if they're going to be points efficient or not. And with the rules that they have, I think they have the capability of being points efficient and being used. We just need to see how many points they actually cost. But just from my first initial reaction, I think these Wolf and Dreadnoughts, I think they're going to be used, and I think they're going to be great. Also, they're mentioning that a lot of stuff that was never in Space Wolves is now going to be used. So all of this stuff, like land speeders, the bikes, the flyers, and then whatever the hell these things are, they're all going to be used in Space Wolves. But how often are you actually going to see them in a competitive list? I don't think you're ever going to see any of these in a competitive list. Unless bikes get something really interesting or something like that, I don't think we're going to see any of these in Space Wolves. We're probably going to see a bunch of Dreadnoughts and characters, to be honest with you. At least from what I've seen so far. So then they say, and more, which will be stuff. There's more stuff to come that we don't know, which actually came out today. They brought out some new stuff, so let's go to that and let's talk about that stuff. So for the new stuff for Space Wolves, by the way, this picture is amazing. They're announcing now Stratagem. So let's go over some of the stratagems that they're going to get. Cunning of the Wolf. Use this stratagem during deployment when setting up a Space Wolves infantry unit. You can set up this unit on the hunt instead of placing it on the battlefield. At the end of any of your movement phase, the unit can join the battle. Set it up so that it is wholly within 6 inches of any battlefield edge of your choice and more than 9 inches away from enemy models. So this is good. It's a nice little like flanking tactic, but against most competitive lists that have a good enough screen, you're never going to be able to get to their backside because they'll leave like 1 or 2 screening units back there to be able to stop you, because you have to be set up within 6 inches of the edge and 9 inches away from your enemy. So if they take like a unit of conscripts and line them up against their whole back edge exactly 6 inches away from the table edge, then you're never going to get in on that side of the board. So this is kind of useful if you're going against a low model count army that can't screen that well, or if their whole army wants to move up the board, which will leave an area behind them to come in on turn 2 or turn 3, then yes, this will be okay. But overall, I think this is kind of like it's not going to be used that well, especially in a competitive sense, because most people are going to know how to counter this very well and very easily just by having some screening troops. So yeah, this is okay, but not the greatest. It's situational. In some situations, it could probably win you the game, but in most situations, it's not going to be used, at least not efficiently. Poked by the Storm. Now this is an amazing one that I'm going to have to get into. So use this stratagem in your Psychic phase. Choose a Rune Priest from your army that successfully manifested a Psychic power in this phase. Your opponent must subtract 1 from all hit rolls for ranged attacks that target friendly Space Wolves units within 6 inches of this model until the beginning of your next Psychic phase. So Rune Priests actually have a spell that I believe is called Stormcaller. What Stormcaller does is Stormcaller gives a +1 save to everything within 6 inches. Basically, it gives cover to everything within 6 inches, which is essentially a +1 save. So not only that, you would cast that to give everything around you a +1 save, which includes your Dreadnoughts, it includes Intercessor Marines, it includes any other Space Wolf unit that you have within 6 inches. Then you activate this thing, and everything that is also getting a +1 to their save is now getting a -1 to hit them as well. Meaning you can actually make a pretty good death ball out of this. So with the list that I'm currently building, I have a Rune Priest that is surrounded by 6 units of Intercessors. You use the spell that gives them all +1 to their saves, so now you basically have Terminator Intercessors, because they're 2 wounds and they got a 2-up save, which is nuts. And they're only 90 points each for each unit, so that's insane value. So that's amazing. It does require you to get a spell off, but I think it's a Warp Charge 6, so it's relatively easy to get off. So yeah, this will give your whole army, or that spell will give your whole army a +1 save. Then on top of that, you activate this, and now everything's -1 to hit as well. This is beautiful, and this is going to help you get your troops into combat And yeah, because the way I'm going to play it is a bunch of characters surrounded by a bunch of intercessors, and then of course Astra Militarum, some Catachan helping them out as well. So you would easily be able to get all your characters in the combat with this, and then your characters are all going to be, at least for me, are all going to have Thunderhammers. So they're going to be hitting on 2s because of their chapter tactic. So yeah, this overall is great. I can see myself using this every turn in order to keep my stuff, give my stuff a little bit more durability and help it get into combat quicker. Then we're going to go on to the Wolf's Eye. Wolf Eye is uses Stratagem in the shooting phase when a unit of Long Fangs from your army is chosen to make its attacks. You can re-roll either failed hit rolls or failed wound rolls for that unit this phase. So for those that don't know, Long Fangs are basically Devastator Marines. And to be honest, in a competitive list, I probably wouldn't have any Long Fangs in my list because there's better options. And if I wanted to use Long Fangs, I would just ally in like some Raven Guard or something like that and use them instead. But overall though, if you do want to use your Long Fangs, you have this, so it does help. So yeah, I guess it's good, but then again, Long Fangs aren't necessarily going to be used in competitive play, but yeah, whatever. Anyways, moving on. The Lone Wolf uses Stratagem at the end of any phase if there is a Space Wolf infantry unit from your army other than a character, servitor, or wolfen that has been reduced to a single model. That model's wounds characteristic is increased by 2 and it gains 2 wounds. It gains the character keyword and you can re-roll failed hit and wound rolls for the remainder of the game. This is kind of cool because you can turn like an intercessor into a shitty character, essentially. But for one command point, you can't really go wrong. It'll help out a little bit. It'll keep them alive. Maybe you need that guy to stay on an objective. Maybe, yeah, maybe you need to protect that one model that stopped from giving up a kill point or something. There's many uses you can have for this. It's only 1 CP, so it's not that big of an investment. And like I've said many times before, options win games. And having more options gives you more chances to win games. So this is a nice option you can have to keep one guy alive for a little bit. Yeah, and so that's really it. Anyways, moving on. Warlord traits and sagas. So this is cool. So if you were to read this, it says that basically these warlord traits count as warlord traits, but if your warlord meets a certain requirement, that warlord trait becomes a buff for everything within, they don't mention it, but I'm going to assume it's within 6 inches. If it was an army-wide buff, then oh my god, that'd be so good. But it's probably like within 6 inches or something. We're going to have to wait for the codex to actually see that. So anyways, you have stuff like this. Saga of the Bear. Roll a dice each time a model affected by this saga loses a wound. On a 6+, that model does not lose a wound. This saga has no effect on models with a similar ability, like Bjorn the Fell-Handed's legendary tenacity ability. And then this is the thing you need to do in order to turn it into an aura. Successfully pass a saving throw for your warlord. Easy enough. Thing is though, is in order to get your guy shot at in the first place to pass the saving throw, you're going to have to put him in a vulnerable position. So this trait I don't think is the best because you're kind of forced to put your Wolf Lord or whoever is your Warlord out in front, and he might have a chance of dying just because you want to get your 6 up feel no pain. So this I don't necessarily like. I guess late game it could help because sure, if he does pass that saving throw, then he's going to end up getting a buff. But what if he fails the rest of his saving throws? What if you had 9 saving throws and you pass 1 but fail the other 7? Then you're going to die and this whole thing is gone anyways. So I don't necessarily like this one. I do like the idea of turning it into a buff for your army, but this Saga of the Bear in particular isn't that great. But let's move on to Saga of the Beast Lair. Add 1 to wound rolls made for attacks by a unit affected by this saga that targets a monster or vehicle. And then this is what you need to do to turn it into an aura. Slay an enemy monster or vehicle with your Warlord, which will be easy, especially if you're using the Thunderhammer ones. So you use this guy with a Thunderhammer. He's going to have 4 attacks, unless they change the data sheets or give them more attacks. He's going to have 4 attacks, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, because they naturally hit on 2s. They get a +1 from the Thunderhammer. Or no, a -1 from the Thunderhammer, but then a +1 for the Hunt trait that they get. So he'll be hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s because of himself, and then because of this Saga of the Beast Slayer, he will be wounding most likely on 2s, and if you have a battle leader, I think it's called, there's a guy that's the equivalent of a lieutenant that allows you to re-roll 1s to wound, then you'll be hitting on 2, or wounding on 2s, re-rolling 1s, which means you're most likely going to kill whatever monster or vehicle you're attacking. Unless it's like a Knight or Magnus or something like some monstrosity like that. But I mean, like against a Demon Prince or something, there's a good chance you're going to go in there and just smack the Demon Prince silly. So if you do that, now you have an aura to get +1 to wound rolls. So you basically gave, you'll basically have a aura buff that is the Red Thirst. So not only are you going to get your +1 to hit, you're going to get +1 to wound on top of it. So this, as soon as you do this, your army is just going to amp up in power so much. And with everything in your army basically going to have a 2-up save and a 3-up invul because of those saves we talked about earlier, plus everything having a storm shield, your army is going to be so hard to get rid of off the table, and they're just going to smack everything like trucks. It's amazing. I think Space Wolves are going to be a force to reckon with, especially with all of this stuff combined. It's going to be amazing. So with that said, yeah, we can start to see how everything's going to work. It's going to be a giant death ball, at least for my list. I can't speak for everybody else, but the way I'm seeing myself playing Space Wolves is it's going to be a giant death ball, or a death star, however you want to call it. It's going to have a bunch of intercessors with Astra Militarum surrounding like 6 characters that are all going to have Thunder Hammers and Storm Shields, and they're just going to get in there and they're going to wreck face. Everything is going to survive for the most part because most of the stuff is going to have a 2-up save and -1 to hit as long as you get your combo off with the Cloaked by the Storm and the Stormcaller spell. And then once you get into combat with this Saga of the Beast Slayer, you're going to end up doing some massive damage to everything. Well, at least when you target monsters or vehicles. That's really only when you need the plus to wound anyways, because your Thunder Hammers are going to wound most infantry in the game on 2s anyways. So yeah, there you go. There's that. Relics of the Fang. So here's the relics. Armor of Rust. Basically, I'm going to summarize this. You get a 4-up invul, and you can nominate 1 enemy unit to fight last in the fight phase, which is great. But the thing is with my list, again, you can play your list differently. Everyone's going to have many different lists. That's the beauty of Warhammer. Everyone can come up with different things and different play styles and play them differently. But with my list, I'm not really going to use the 4-up invul, because most of my stuff is going to have a 3-up invul from Storm Shields. But I might use this just for the second half of the ability, because let's say you have 3 Wolf Lords with Thunder Hammers charging a Knight. Well, the first Wolf Lord probably isn't going to kill the Knight, so there's a chance your opponent can pay 2 command points to interrupt, and they have a decent chance of killing 1 or 2 of the other Wolf Lords before they get a chance to attack. So if you were to use this, you can nominate that Knight to fight last in the fight phase, which means all of your Wolf Lords will get to attack first, and then you have a good chance of killing the Knight or getting it down to like 2 or 3 wounds so that it's on its last bracket, and there's a good chance that your guys will survive the combat. So I can see the second part of this working a lot better than the first part. The 4-up invul, meh, but being able to nominate an enemy unit to fight last is great, and I think it would help the army a lot, because this army is going to be played, again, at least the way I'm going to play it, which I think would be the most efficient way to play it, is going to be a pure melee army. And yeah, so melee armies fighting other melee armies, this will help a lot by being able to stop a big unit from being able to interrupt. Then we have Frost Fury. This is just a boosted up Stormbolter. This is great. I can see this working. I would probably take this like an auto-include most of the time, because it turns your gun into Assault 4, Strength 4, -1, 2 damage, and then if you anything you shoot at suffers an unsaved wound, roll a d6 on a 4+, they suffer a mortal wound on top of it. So this is great. I love this. I would probably take it almost every game, unless I had to take this to like stop melee stuff or whatever. This is still a good relic. I like it. So then we're going to move on to Psychic Powers. Living Lightning. So summarizing this, it's a warp charge value of 6. It's like a smite. You have to you do d3 mortal wounds to the closest visible enemy unit, but if that enemy unit is destroyed as a result, the closest enemy unit within 18 inches of that last model then suffers d3 mortal wounds, and it continues until there's no units left that get fully destroyed. This could have a chain reaction that really dominates your opponent, depending on how big their list is, or how many units they have, how many wounds in each of those units. This could have a chain reaction that just destroys like 6 units. Most likely that's never going to happen, and this will most likely just be used as an extra smite. But I mean, in certain situations, this has the potential to do a ton of damage. It just, you need all the stars to like align and everything in order to get it off. But I mean, it could happen, and I'm sure it will happen in some games. So Living Lightning, good spell. Then we're moving on to Fury of the Wolf Spirits, which I found weird at first, but then I read one little part that made it good. Fury of the Wolf Spirits has a warp charge value of 7. If manifested, the Rune Priest gains the following weapon until the start of your next psychic phase. Which at first I was like, he already has a decent weapon, why does he need another one? But then I read this. Abilities. After the Rune Priest makes his close combat attacks, you can attack with Frecky and Gary. Make 6 additional attacks with this weapon profile! Meaning he gets his normal attacks, and then on top of that he gets 6 attacks with this profile, meaning he's going to destroy infantry. Because he's going to, again, be hitting on 2s because of the the trait thing, he most likely will be getting a +1 to wound if he's going against a monster or a vehicle. But against infantry, he's still going to be wounding most likely on 3s, and yeah, he's going to do pretty good. I like this spell as well, especially if you're using a Rune Priest, which my list will be, so I think this will be good. And then, available tomorrow. So tomorrow, the pre-order for the Codex is coming out, and then a week from tomorrow, the actual release of the Codex is coming out. So I look forward to it, and overall, just to summarize it, I think Space Wolves are going to be great. Just the combination of everything hitting on 2s in close combat, and then re-rolling 1s. Even your characters with Thunderhammers are going to be hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s because of themselves. You have the ability from your Rune Priest that makes your little death ball gets a +1 to their saves, so you'll have 2+ save intercessors, which are basically like Terminators at that point. And then you're gonna have the the 3 command point stratagem that makes basically everything 6 inches of the Rune Priest, which should be your whole army if you build this correctly. Should make it all -1 to hit. So yeah, so and then on top of that, you can have a Warlord trait that gives your Warlord +1 to wound, and if he kills a monster or vehicle, that turns into an aura for the rest of your army. Just with that stuff alone, I could see myself playing Space Wolves coming up in the future, which in fact, I am now going to start working on a Space Wolf list, and I'm going to put my 240 cultist list aside for now, mainly because I don't want to paint 240 cultists, but also because with chapter approved just around the corner, I have a feeling cultists might get touched again. Maybe it'll go down to like 30-man squads or 20, so I want to wait for a minute and before I invest too much money and time into painting 240 cultists. So we're going to wait until after chapter approved for that cultist list. And instead, we're going to work on some Space Wolves lists. So yeah, you can look forward to some Space Wolves coming in the future. I'm going to buy myself some Intercessors and get started right away. And yeah, I've already got the Wolf Cavalry and stuff because I already own Space Wolves, for those that don't know. So yeah, I'm just going to have to do a little bit of converting work, and we'll, yeah, we're going to have some great stuff coming in the future for Space Wolves. But yeah, I think the army is going to be great. I think it has a chance of being top tier. It's going to be at least as... I think it will be just as strong as Blood Angels. Because also we have tons of information we don't know about yet. There's still tons to come when the Codex actually gets released. But you can be sure that I'm going to buy the Codex the day it comes out, and we're going to do some looking into it. I don't think I'm going to make a video on it right away. I'll save that for a faction focus, which, speaking of which, the Chaos Space Marine faction focus is underway. I am working on it. It will be out probably sometime next week. Don't quote me on that because it is taking me a while to do it. I will release other videos, obviously. I'm not going to wait a week or two to release one video, so I will have other mini videos in between that. But yeah, the faction focus is on the way, and I hope you guys look forward to that. But anyways, that's going to be it for this little mini review of the information we have for Space Wolves. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe to the video. And if you're already subscribed but would like to help support the channel even further, you can do so on Patreon. I help with list building, I make custom lists, and I help give basic coaching to all my patrons. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, then check me out on Patreon. Anyways, thanks for watching the video, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Happy wargaming.